Well, the weather for the whole of the south of England will continue as it has for the next few weeks. It's going to be hot and moist, with temperatures rising steadily as time goes on. There's a chance of steamy moments as we move into the... sod it. We never wanted to do this. We never wanted to be weathermen and women making innuendos about hot atmospheres and drizzly countries. We didn't want to be child-friendly. We didn't want to bang on about being for over 18s only. We want to talk about our sexy adventures. We want to be lifestylers, leaping from bush to bush as we sail down the rivers of British sex clubs and mountains of crazy experiences. The cheeky purple mamba, the liquid silk pumped liberally into our hand, the rodeo classic brief harness complete with Tantus curve, the Enjoy Pure One stainless steel dildo, the hot octopus digit, the ever so short messages on Fab Swingers, the sexy friends on Twitter, and the mighty vanilla alternative. With my best girlie by my side, we'd swing, swing, swing. Get in the gym or to your car. With our advice, you could go far. We'll fuck things up when we make mistakes. And talk about our sexy dates. It's getting hard for this to rhyme. Just as well, 'cause it's bed hopping time. Welcome to episode 69 of the Bed Hoppers podcast. My name is Mr. H.
And I'm Mrs. H.
I can't believe we've done 69 of these fuckers.
Right?
That's not the people that listen.
I was going to say, it sounds like you've got 69 people in the room.
We have one other person in the room, which we'll get to in a moment. But there's something else that I want to talk about first.
Go on.
It is nearly our 2-year poderversary.
Oh, March is our 2-year poderversary, but what date?
I don't know. I just knew it was now-ish.
Right, okay.
I'm going to say when you're listening, no matter when you're listening, it is now our 2-year poderversary.
Hey.
So please send us presents, gifts. Remember, we don't need any more bed hopper points. We've got quite enough of those bastards already. We've got quite a lot of those. So yeah, 69 and 2-year poderversary.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty good.
Pretty big deal.
So before we bring on our special guest, who's having to keep very quiet over there in the corner, back in your cage. Oh, she doesn't look like she wants to be in that cage for that much longer. Okay. We shall unleash her soon enough, which is appropriate given her name, perhaps. One of the things we wanted to do is give you a brief update about the world around us and what's been going on. We've had so many people reach out and wish us well and support us and be extremely wonderful. So we just want to thank you for that. We want to give you a little bit of an update because it's not been easy recently.
I'm expecting a plague of locusts any minute. A swarm of them.
A swarm of locusts?
Yes, absolutely. It's no less than I deserve, I think.
Well, do you mean for people thanking you? That's what they're going to send you?
Just to describe the epically, sort of biblically awful things that keeps happening.
Epically, biblically.
Yeah.
I can't even say that now.
Yeah.
It's terrible, isn't it?
So the plague of locusts is imminent. I'm quite sure of that.
Okay. Well, do you want me to explain what's going on?
Yeah, go on. But make it short because everyone's fed up of it now.
Yeah, so we're not going to dwell too much on this because we need something to cheer us up.
Yes.
But effectively, Mrs. H's mum was last week given a terminal cancer diagnosis.
Yep,
so
that's a bag of dicks.
It was a bag of dicks. Well, that wasn't what caused it, I assume.
That's not what the doctor said either.
No.
He didn't come in and say, this is going to be a bag of dicks, but...
I think they found a tumour rather than a bag of dicks. A bag of dicks would have been a lot easier to take, perhaps. I don't know, actually. Could you take a bag of dicks?
Could I? I'm a bit low ebb right now, so probably not.
What quantifies a bag of dicks? Tune in next week to find out on the Bed Hoppers podcast. So yeah, we've been dealing with the unfortunate fallout of that and working through what's going to happen over the coming weeks and months if we have them, really. So it's been a bit of a shock. She went into hospital for something completely different and is still in there for something utterly different. So we're kind of handling that and kind of working through it. So, but, you know, we keep thinking that life can't get any worse. So, you know, hopefully there won't be a plague of locusts outside.
But we're keeping it relatively succinct because, you know, that's life and bad things happen to people all the time and we just get on with it.
Yeah, I think you just have to keep on trucking.
And it's, you know what, it's nice to find something other than bad stuff.
Oh, we should say keep on hopping.
Keep on hopping.
Yeah, that should be a new like bumper sticker.
Yep. And get it on a t-shirt.
Yeah, there's many things I've put on a t-shirt, but keep on hopping might be the new one, I think.
Is it like the follow-on from Shit Happens?
Yeah, shit happens. Keep on hopping.
Okay.
It's quite tough to say, I think, but I'm going to keep saying it until it's a mantra for me.
Okay. I keep saying many things as a mantra, but nothing's happened so far.
Exactly that. So anyway, we wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody that's reached out, everyone that sent us messages on Twitter, Instagram, even Fab, email. Some people turned up rummaging through our bins and were wishing us well. So
people are universally lovely, and in the bleakest of times, people do the nicest things.
they do.
So I take comfort from that.
And I bought you a pair of shoes today, so life can't
Yes,
be
you
too
did.
bad.
You are. A little rainbow in my dark cloud.
Oh, I'm a happy little rainbow.
You
Oh, let's just dwell on how amazing I am for the next 5 minutes. It'd be great.
Well, let's move on before your ego gets exponentially huge.
Okay, and before I depress everybody as well.
Yeah.
So moving swiftly onwards, we've
Yes.
got a variety of topics that Mrs. H has gathered for us today. So she is technically in the driving seat.
Wow, I don't know about that.
So she did a brief 2.5 minutes worth of research before we jumped on the mic and invited her good friend, who we're going to call Dr. Grant, over. Hello, Dr. Grant.
Hello.
Oh, she leaned into the
wow.
microphone there.
Well, you told me I had to get close to the mic.
You
so
do.
I was like
Yeah.
filleting it. I don't know how this is supposed to work.
She's going to fit in really well.
Yeah.
No, just yeah. We'll see how we go.
So should we explain who Dr. Grant is?
Yes. So Dr. Grant appears in Jurassic Park in the first...
I'm a very well-respected paleontologist with a specific interest in velociraptor behaviour.
So this episode's all about dinosaurs.
Cove! Cove!
Yeah. So we've invited Dr. Grant on because
Did we explain who she was?
Well, we just said she's a paleontologist.
Okay. So we just...
Ross from Friends is a paleontologist.
Oh God, yeah, it is. Don't
So-
ever compare yourself to Ross.
So we went into the dinosaur shop and we stole ourselves a paleontologist. And here she is.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yes. Who just happens to have the same name as someone from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, but I can talk about dinosaur breeding habits.
You'd love it, wouldn't you?
I would love that. Yeah.
Didn't say the magic word.
Oh, it's just going to be a whole plethora of Jurassic puns now, isn't it? All the way through.
No.
You've
no,
probably
it's
got
not.
plenty, haven't you?
I don't have any backed up at all.
I'm just watching Mr. H's brain must think of puns.
Of course, you must have loads of dinosaur jokes ready.
No, I don't need them. I can just...
You don't need them.
No, I don't need them. I'll just carry on as per normal. So, who is Dr. Grant? We still haven't got to the bottom of it.
Well, Dr. Grant is a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
And Dr. Grant has been in the know, as it were, about what we do, our non-monogamous lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But she herself is strictly monogamous.
She's a muggle.
She's a she's a non-magic.
I'm a
folk.
squib.
You could dream of being a squib.
I wish I was a squib. Yeah, squibs. Squibs go to Hogwarts? No.
No,
Squibs have some level of magic ability, do they not?
Yeah,
Or some
so
sort of...
maybe I flunked out of Hogwarts first year.
I
That's
think
probably an
so.
accurate, actually, assessment.
Aw.
Is Hagrid a squib?
Hagrid is not a squib.
No.
Hagrid got expelled.
Yeah, it's the caretaker that's the squib.
Argus Filch. There we
There
go.
you go.
There,
and
right.
his- and
Knowledge.
his cat.
There we go. I knew
Actually,
someone
his
was a
cat's not
squib.
squib, but I suppose by association.
Is this cat Mrs. Norris?
Mrs. Norris, yeah.
There we go. Welcome to Potter Chat. Mixed in with Bedhoppers. It's going to be a fun ride.
Dinosaurs and Harry Potter.
What more could you want?
I'd love that.
I
Wizards
know.
versus dinosaurs
Oh my God, that's
oh my
amazing.
god. Yeah.
versus aliens.
Yeah, just
Because
sort
let's just
Snake
round it up.
just riding a pterodactyl.
It's taken a really
Oh,
strange
God.
turn.
Why did you see that film? I'm just saying.
Who wouldn't? Let's go away and write the script for it immediately.
Can we CG Alan Rickman back? It's what he was meant to do.
Yeah, but in some of them leather trousers that
Oh my God.
Dr. Ian Malcolm wears.
This is going very strange.
It's taking a real weird turn very
But this
early.
is like that awful moment in that Transformer film where Grimlock rides...
Let us not ever speak of the moment where Grimlock is ridden by Optimus Prime in a sweet, weird bit of Transformer making love history.
Bit that you really, really didn't like.
There were many bits I didn't like in those films.
But that was one particular bit that irked you.
That upset me. It really upset me.
I feel like the need to describe the pure rage that just came across Mr. H's face. Like the vein just throbbed really temporarily.
I know, I shouldn't have
What, the
gone
one on my
there,
face?
Yeah, on the temple.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that one.
Yeah, I know, I shouldn't have gone
It
there.
made
Not
every
that
other
face.
vein shrink away, I can tell you. Michael Bay, you have a lot to answer for. Anyways, so what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought we'd have a bit of a debate.
Ooh.
I know.
Is it a small debate or a...
Well, there's only 3 of us, so it couldn't be described as a mass debate. But it's a debate of sorts. Because one thing that I frequently talk about with Dr. Grant...
Shoes.
Apart from shoes,
Yeah, shoes,
because
obviously.
shoes obviously are, top of the list. But we do like to have a good natter about...
Pizza.
Right, you can listen to me?
Yes, I am listening.
The psychology behind non-monogamy.
Okay.
Because we find it quite fascinating. And Dr. Grant particularly found it interesting from the beginning when I told her what we do. And she had a billion questions to me straight away, which was, obvious. And one of the things she said to me from the beginning was, I'm not surprised that you do this. And it's no great shock to me. That
So did she say, Mrs. H, you are such a slut? Taking it back.
No, but one of the things that she did say, which resonated with me, was that we have a very healthy sex life, you and I.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's always been the case. And I think one of the things that you might have said to me in the beginning was, well, you're always having sex, doesn't surprise me. True story?
True story confirmed.
Yeah, true story.
I did say that.
And over the couple of years or so, but we've talked about it. We've talked about various little bits and pieces about why we do it, and what we get from it, that kind of thing. And it's questions we get all the time from people. Again, why do you do it? What's in it for your relationship? Could you ever give it up? What are the pitfalls? That kind of thing. But something that occurred to me recently, actually, was when you said in the beginning, "Oh, you have loads of sex, so it's no surprise that you do this." It got me to thinking. Is that basically, a perception that people have of the swinging community? That if you have loads of sex, then you must be into something a bit freaky. So I've got a little gentle list going on of questions I might ask Dr. Grant.
Okay.
And I've got no doubt you've got opinions on as well.
I'm never short of opinions.
I was going to say, it's a really articulate way of saying I'm a nosy beggar, isn't it, really? I've got some questions.
Yeah, but I love that we could talk about this sort of thing together.
Yeah.
And it was never me kind of trying to indoctrinate you into a cult of what we're doing. But I always valued your opinion about what we did as well. And the first thing you said was, are you okay? Is your relationship okay? And as long as you're happy, crack on.
Oh, well, I think the thing is that there are far too many people in inverted commas monogamous relationships who are in fact being unfaithful to one another and presenting themselves as a perfect family unit. I could rattle off people I work with who I know have actively been unfaithful to their other halves.
I think I can do this. It's unethically non-monogamous.
Confirmed. Or cheating.
Yeah.
We've all seen that show, Cheaters. You know what happens. They go around in the van and they watch them.
I thought you said nacho cheaters then.
Oh my God.
Nacho
I was like,
cheaters.
nachos, I am in.
Nacho cheaters.
It means you steal someone else's nachos, I think.
Yeah, it's basically what Mr. H does when you and I go out, is that he just chuckles to himself and then just creates a massive pile of nachos that he eats all to himself.
Yeah.
I think you find that I roll about in them like Smaug and his gold.
All mine.
So
All
you're
for Mr.
cheating on me
H.
with nachos.
All of the nachos are mine.
Yeah,
I knew it.
Confirmed.
So it's fine for you to sleep with other people's wives, but never nachos.
So food is where you draw the line.
Nacho wife.
Absolutely, yeah. Don't you ever be unfaithful to me with nachos.
But I think the thing is, though, is that there are so many hypocritical relationships out there where they are being unfaithful to one another. They shouldn't be in that relationship because they're not happy in the relationship they're in, clearly. I think if you're being unethically non-monogamous to somebody and that's not the arrangement you have, then it's in reflection that you're not happy in your relationship. Whereas I've always known you both to be extremely happy in your relationship with a very healthy sex life. And actually, it wasn't a surprise to me in that, oh yeah, you guys all get freaking doink all the time and this is just part of the red room of pain that you guys have, or some such perception. It wasn't that. It's that you're both a very sexually adventurous but articulate and emotionally articulate with one another. And I've also always known that you are bisexual as well, and that was probably an element of that just widened your sexual repertoire as a couple.
Oh, what a lovely way of putting it.
Yes, another tool in the sexual arsenal.
There you go. We're not being sleazy. We're widening our sexual repertoire.
Well, I just think that
With a hint of sleaze.
I think there's a lot of pain in the world that probably could be gotten rid of if people were just more accepting of sexuality in general, of their own sexuality within reason. I've got a lot of friends in the BDSM community, and the mantra is always safe, sane, consensual. So if people are doing that, whatever's your kink, whatever's your thing, if it's illegal and people are getting hurt, then I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we look at, for example, systemically with things like the Catholic Church, how much pain has been created by enforcing celibacy on a group of people who probably initially had normal, healthy, human sexual desires, but along the way, this horrible thing has happened and come out of it. And a lot of that has to do with you're expecting a group of people who are human, who have sexual desires, to not completely suppress that. And of course, then that desire becomes perverted and something horrible happens. I'm not a psychologist, but there's been a lot of studies into that.
There is, absolutely.
And I think that's completely endemic, really.
So what you're saying is don't join the church, be a swinger.
Yeah, everyone would be happier.
Thanks, I think I got the most out of that message.
Yeah, no, I just think that sexuality has always been a means of, I come from a history background, obviously, Dr. Grant, has been a means of controlling people, particularly women, which is where a lot of perception comes from. And I think that we're still suffering from a hangover of that a little bit. And people generally tend to be happier if they kind of can liberate themselves from that sort of.
And I think generally the non-monogamous community are very clear on their communication channels with each other, and the reason it works so well is because we're so hot on the communication and making sure that we're doing what we're doing and it's not hurting our partner, and that we're doing it consensually and we're committed, to not just being infidelious. You're
Which
very quiet,
still
Mr. H.
sounds like a Harry Potter curse.
Infidelious.
And then their trousers just come down.
Back to Potter watch. Wait, are these the leather trousers that
the
Snape's
leather trousers
wearing whilst he's riding the T-Rex?
You know about my guilty crush on Alan Rickman, so
it's one I share with you.
yeah, because he did wear some leather trousers in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and that was enjoyable.
Very true.
I don't know. I think of all the couples and marriages I know, I would say that you two are the strongest in terms of your
weightlifting ability.
Yeah, you just clean and jerk right over your head.
Totally bench press me.
I clean and jerk over my head so many times.
Again, that's what happens on Nacho Night. I just think that in terms of, you have such a strong emotional connection, but you talk about your relationship and your emotions more than any other couple I know. And so you're so in tune with one another that actually, when you said to me, this is what we're doing, and I was like, yeah, okay, because actually out of every couple I knew, if anyone was going to do it, but you would be the most emotionally equipped to manage that and any potential fallout from it, because I've got friends who have considered bringing a third party in, and I think we'd all be surprised by how many people, have had that conversation. But actually, if you took a step back and look at that relationship, maybe then the jealousy might start to come in, and that sort of insipid thing that creeps in when that sort of thing happens. And actually, you two are so open, and you've had to really fight to be in the relationship you're in. So, knowing your history, but potted history, but actually, so for that reason, you guys aren't going to throw it out the window for something you weren't ultimately committed to.
Do you think the act of consenting non-monogamy then contributes to people having a stronger relationship ultimately? Do you think it stops people from cheating and straying and running off with other people and doing?
I'm going to jump in on this. So I think people go in with different reasons, and depending on the reason and their approach, will have an impact on the sort of mileage that they get out of it. So for some people, they'll go in and they'll be looking to just fuck everything, and they're using it as a replacement for their own excitement that they have at home, or to just get away from what's at home.
Or because their own sex life is not great. Maybe.
Yeah, and I think those sort of experiences or those sort of approaches don't tend to work that well in the long run. And where we've spoken to people and met people that have had that approach, more often than not, those relationships have either folded or their approach and the lifestyle has folded. So they've very quick. It's spat them out pretty quickly. The people that tend to be much more long lasting tend to be those with a much better connection and a much better sort of thought process behind it, and they're going in to share something as an experience, and therefore it doesn't tend to spit them out as much. Of course, there's jealousy and moments where it goes wrong, but actually their ability to communicate tends to be a lot better, and their ability to get through issues tends to be a lot better as well. So we're
trying to enhance something rather than patch something up.
Yeah, and I think
throwing something at it and going, let's see if this happens then.
Yeah, and I think it all depends on what you're going in for and why. And some people, it might be that the relationship's absolutely great, but they just want to add some extra sexy, spicy times to it. And that, if that's what they're after, that can, be a real thrill ride for them. But, it's if you don't have the right reasons or don't have the solid enough relationship at the beginning, or you're not 100% sure, then it can really damage you. I think actually that's not quite true. I think you can be not 100% sure about it, but you just need to be able to deal with the fallout of it if it's not for you when you try it.
Yeah. No, absolutely, you're right.
I think if you're unstable when you enter into it, all it's going to do is widen any fissures that are already cracks in your relationship. They're just going to split open because you've not got that foundation. I think it's a really interesting point you make about whether consensual non-monogamy is an alternative to people who staying together longer. I think I've got two differing opinions about that. I think for certain people it does work because you've got the right relationship and the right foundation. I think consensual non-monogamy is also something that is a card that is drawn from the cheater's handbook. Well, the concept of marriage is antiquated, or the concept of monogamy is antiquated, and we were all monkeys once, chimps in the zoo, and we would just shag about, and that's how we're meant to be, and so I'm not going to change my poor behaviour because I am evolutionary programmed.
Isn't it Scarlett Johansson that said recently people are not designed to be monogamous? I think that was recently.
But I think that if you're looking at this from an anthropological standpoint, initially, no, we're not designed to, but actually you've constructed a society over hundreds of thousands of years where we have survived in family units, and that has evolved.
But also, haven't we constructed a society where, for example, women are seen as second-class citizens?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There is an argument to be said that society in itself needs to be rethought and reviewed in that way in terms of how we accept many normals that are just
and we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the sort of roots that we come from, and typically people meet, they fall in love, they have a family sometimes, or not always, and they become this, as you say, this family unit, and it's typically a hierarchical, right, you are meant to do this stuff. And then when you try and break that a little bit and you say, well, actually, what about my wants and my needs? And I don't want to always be this family figure. I want to break away and think about my own needs. And that's when society turn around and go, whoa, you're just being sleazy. And, you just after sex all the time.
Well, I think that's the narrative that you're presented with. And I think if you and I were to reflect on the media portrayal of relationships as we've grown up, I know...
Dr. Grant, can you please point your face towards the microphone?
Sorry, I was thinking. I was musing. I think that the narrative you're presented from a really early age, particularly if you're a woman, and particularly if you are of the sort of generation like me who grew up in the 90s and 80s, is you're drip-fed a diet of media, particularly films, where the narrative is boy meets girl, girl likes boy, get married, and then they have children. It's not get married, have children, and then together they explore consensual non-monogamy and then bring in a third party. And when you look at films constructing that, I'm thinking of like sort of art house French films typically, because they're all more sexually open-minded, like The Dreamers and things like that, where people bring in a third party. It's normally like, ooh, sexy mayhem ensues, or something goes wrong and people get emotionally caught up and things get unpicked. And the perception then is, boy meets girl, good. Anything outside of that, potentially bad. And I cannot think really off the top of my head of any memorable media portrayals of consensual non-monogamy where it's presented as a normal and or acceptable positive thing.
There's very few, very few.
very few.
Although when you said about growing up on films and boy meets girl and all this sort of stuff, in my head I was thinking, well, the films I grew up on were big robot dies, a young robot takes Matrix, destroys
you mean the robots
Unicron.
don't have a threesome?
Well, I'm thinking like your standard, like your 90s and early 2000 rom-coms, of which many women have watched a million times over because you think this is the journey for me and this is what normal should look like.
Yeah.
Also, you should be looking and behaving a certain way and eating a certain way and doing all the other horrible pressures that women are under. But I think one of the main things we're told is that is what a family unit looks like. And
That's what you're supposed to do. And, you know, you're not doing that is like, oh, you're a bit weird then, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think now we're, particularly in the past few years, I'm noticing that from when I was a kid, you know, blended families in terms of families remarrying and divorce and stuff was more common. But now we have, you know, marriages where people who are of every sexual orientation should and are able to marry, and people are more open in their gender orientation as well. And that's wonderful to see. So the family unit actually now is starting to look different, and it should do.
Very diverse. Absolutely.
And we've seen examples like in the US more so than over here, I think, of people living in polyamorous marriages, relationships, and that works for them. I think there's still this pervasive 2.4 children.
I think there is, but
attitude.
I get the sense that, you know, I hope that we're on a sort of wave of change, and that there is a level of support for people who don't fit into that 2.4 category. And you know, that's why we did a television show, because we want to, although I hate the word normalize,
break the stigmas,
break the stigmas of what we do. And I don't feel like we should be ashamed of what we do. I feel like this enhances our relationship, and the second that it doesn't is one that, you know, I don't think we'll do it anymore. But actually, while it is a really positive thing for us, you know, we want to promote it. That's why we do the show, is to try and break down some of those barriers and help people looking to get started, and help them to consider some things that, you know, perhaps they should avoid, like being sick on a muff or whatever. You know?
I mean, some of the stuff that you guys have told me, I mean, I guarantee you, all of the stories you've told, diluted, have probably happened to some woman on her own dating at some point. Like Special Brew has happened to every woman. I can guarantee you.
He's not limited. He's not limited to the swinging universe.
No,
I can
it's
assure
just
you.
universal. It's like a universal truth. Special Brew is going to show up in your dating life at some point.
Well, actually, we had a suggestion that as part of our social that we've got coming up, and by the way, there's, I believe, just one ticket left at this point. Brilliant.
One ticket.
Nailing it. That one of the cocktails should be called Special Brew.
I would really appreciate it if you did that, please.
Maybe we should just get one can and put it in the corner with a little light on it, and, you know, just
Burberry cap, just
Yes.
some socks, sports
And a
socks,
vape.
some sports
Vape
direct,
machine.
pulled really high over it. Just wow. But yeah, no, I agree. It just, I think that it's not universal, but watching you guys go out and do that has been, I mean, I'm a nosy beggar, so it's been phenomenal for me to watch.
literally watching us when we have a direct video
through the
feed.
window, little live, that Ring doorbell that I installed on the inside of your house.
So, I mean, I did have a follow-up question, but I mean, we've lightly touched on it already, but my question was going to be, why do so many people feel that they have to remain closeted and they have to be anonymous and they can't tell people about this?
Well, firstly, I love a bit of light touch. Secondly, I think there is a stigma attached to non-monogamy, I think, or ethical non-monogamy. Whilst the world is starting to change, or at least it feels that way, it's not in a space where it is accepted. And I think, you know, people can lose their jobs over it. We've seen that happen, you know, in the media before, and, you know, like Holly and Michael. I think Michael lost his job over this whole thing of them being involved in it. It is very sad.
People are very judgmental.
We've known people have had to quit their jobs because they've had contracts in place of like sort of ethics.
Yeah. Morality
clauses, not mortality clauses.
Morality clauses, yeah, not mortality.
Though every time I hear morality, I think of Mortal Kombat, like it's an end finishing move.
Do you?
Morality.
I think of moral oral.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
I think of Moral Oral a lot. That was a good show. But yeah, I think the reality is that actually being out does open you up to judgment and
absolutely, and ridicule.
Yeah,
and, you know, fear of reprisal and like losing friends.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we decided to go face out, you know,
because we did that recently.
We did. Supposed to like butt out. I don't know.
Face off.
I've often been told to butt out.
Yeah, butt up.
But you're right. We decided to reveal our faces eventually because the clandestine nature of, you know, having to feel slightly ashamed of not being able to show your face doesn't sit well with me.
But the having a secret and doing something naughty at the weekend is quite alluring.
It was
It's fun.
very exciting for the first year or so, definitely. It was nice to have that.
Is it all old hat now?
Well, you know, it gets...
Oh, honey, we only had an orgy with 52 people in this weekend. It was terrible.
I do agree to have a secret is quite fun, and it is nice to have a bit of a, we've got this weird double life, and you know, if only they knew. But then, again, after a while, I feel a bit like, why should I feel like I can't talk openly about anything?
I think there is a difference between being able to
I'm not
answer...
trying to feed people details in graphic detail of what
and
I
that's
do.
the bit, I think that's the fine line, isn't it? You don't necessarily want to go broadcasting, although ironically he says
here
we are.
Wow.
but you don't necessarily go telling people who don't want to know about
No,
it.
of course not.
But if someone asks you, then I think, or asks you, then you tell them all about Bluetooth, SMS, GPR, all that stuff. But you give them an honest answer and you tell them about our approach or whatever. I think that's the difference. I think when people start sort of broadcasting and almost preaching to people directly who don't want to know about it, it feels very inauthentic to me. It feels really almost culty, like become one of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perception that is quite pervasive, and it's always been something that's quite and it's something you joke about because it's part of the British sense of humour, I think, that the swinger jokes like the pampas grass and the keys in the bowl.
Yeah.
My parents have some friends who are naturists and they're lovely and there's nothing wrong, but we always used to joke and be like, keys in a bowl, like, don't drop the soap. And we just used to do that because we were uncomfortable about them being so comfortable with themselves in their own skin. And I think that's where you hit the nail on the head, is people are uncomfortable with what they don't know, and they also, if they're uncomfortable with themselves, the mirror is always looking inward, and it's about them and how they feel about their own sexuality, their own perceptions of what's normal. And when they're confronted by someone who doesn't adhere to that and is incredibly comfortable with it, they get resistant.
Literally taken my next question out of my mouth, which was very much about triggers, and I was going to ask the question. I was going to ask the question around, does the idea of non-monogamy as a concept cause these trigger reactions in people to look inwardly at their own relationships there and feel that immediate fear factor, jealousy factor, the insecurity that they think that, I would feel that if my husband asked me to do that, I would immediately feel fear and insecurity, you know, and that trigger rises as soon as you hear that someone is actually able to, you know, have their own relationship in a very, very different dynamic.
I think it's quite a scary conversation. It's quite a scary thing to find out. And I think unless you have an awareness of that approach to life, unless you've experienced it or seen it or witnessed it on even just television or whatever, then actually someone pulling this out of the blue would probably be quite worrying. And going back to some of the points Dr. Grant was mentioning there, I mean, there's all these preconceptions of the lifestyle, the dirty swingers. That's my current hated one.
I hate it too.
Who said that?
Oh, you hear it a lot at work, funnily enough, dirty swingers.
Yeah.
Swinging
you're out at work as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So,
wow.
But I think some of the people that have used that don't necessarily know or haven't thought about it. But it's a phrase that gets dragged out a lot. It's like, dirty, filthy swingers. For one, I'm exceptionally clean and I always smell nice. But
I can smell him.
Yeah. Smell a little bit closer, you'll be fine. But it is that kind of preconceived notion. So actually, you go to speak to your partner and say, well, don't you think it would be interesting and exciting to explore this thing? And then you probably are going to immediately go to this sort of, this keys in a bowl image, these dirty swingers, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, because you haven't experienced it in any other medium, you haven't seen it or you haven't considered it. And the more stuff there is out there, the more TV, more films and everything like that exist, the better off the lifestyle on this approach will be, because actually it kind of normalizes it, and it makes it less frightening, and people are probably more open to try it. What I have found interesting though is that sort of the younger generation, and for us that's swiftly becoming everybody, tend to be much more au fait with things like not Twitter. No, they were very, that's like old hat, isn't it? With things like Grindr and Field and all these sorts of things. And it almost seems the norm for them to be able to hook up and have a threesome or have relationships that are between several. So,
I agree.
and I do wonder if they're even more open than we are. It's just they don't tend to put a label on it.
So maybe society is shifting then, and the younger generation now are very much not necessarily looking to have that, boy meets girl scenario, settle it down, have a unit.
Boy meets girl, girl meets girl, girl marries dog.
Yeah, I think, and funny enough, I was having this conversation a couple of hours ago in the car with Mr. Grant, because...
Not a doctor.
Not a doctor, confirmed.
Not as clever as you.
Well, we all know that, but bless him. No, sorry, darling. Is that we were talking about, on a slightly different topic, not that it's similar but not the same, but in terms of things like gender fluidity and gender identity. And when we were at school, when we were at college, it was not a thing. And you were either, your sexuality was very different to your gender, but you were either male or female and gay, straight, bisexual. Pretty much that was the wheelhouse.
I don't even think bisexual really existed.
When I was
when I was at university or school, like we were aware of it, but more so as I moved into the fray of the adult world. Whereas now you have, sex, biological sex, but you also have intersex as well. And then you have so many genders, a spectrum of gender, as is right and proper. If you identify and feel you're a gender, that's great. Mr. Grant was like, oh yeah, but that seems to be everywhere now and everyone can decide what they are. And in the older generation, that's certainly an opinion. Whether I agree with that, I don't agree with that. But my thought behind it is actually no, it's always been there. It's just that people are much more comfortable now coming forth and expressing what they identify as. And if you look at a lot of celebrities, I'm thinking Jamila Jamil, Philip Schofield, all of those people who have gone, actually, I'm comfortable identifying this is my sexuality, this is my gender, this is who I am. It's not that suddenly there's like a weird gender plague that's emerged and everyone's like, pow, I'll be whatever I want now. Like there's some sort of, I don't know, My Little Pony and you're just coming out and going, I'm the rainbow one today. No, you've always felt that way. You've always been that way. It's just that now you're comfortable.
I think there is something, though, beyond the comfort of actually knowing what it is. And it's the understanding those labels, identities and whatever. And that's where I think they are useful in that it helps someone that's trying to figure out where they are in the world to be able to say, yes, I think that might be me.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I can identify with that now.
Like, people who identify as pansexual, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I would say I'm straight. I'm the straighter end of the spectrum, but I think I just happen to have fallen in love and been in relationships with men. I don't discount that one day you could bolt from the blue if you fell in love with a woman. You can't rule that out. I'd probably not, just because I am a woman and I couldn't live with me. But that's just that's just me. But I think that you can't. And then
what did you call me?
Oh, hilarious. But you can't say that that's not going to happen to you. And I think pansexual is a really good way of saying, actually, I fall in love with a person, not their gender.
Yeah.
And there's kids out there or people out there and go, actually, I've always felt that way. That explains it. And they're happy. And the same's true with sexuality. The more you learn, the more you realise what's for you. And you go, oh, actually, there's a name for this and I'm not weird. I just am this.
This makes sense to me now.
This is my thing. Oh, okay.
And I think that helps everyone else get their head around what that might be as well. So, it's much easier to tell your parents what something is if there is a label there rather than trying to explain just the emotions behind it. Like trying to explain emotions is quite difficult enough as it is sometimes.
Yeah, emotions are very twisty, turny. It actually makes me think of the really amazing program on Netflix, Sex Education.
We've talked about it. It's amazing.
Apart from all the coronavirus memes that are just bringing me life right now. Or washing your hands, you dirty pig. Thank you, the man who plays Eric. Just wow. But also, in terms of there was a girl who realised she was asexual.
Yes.
And it took a while of observing to realise that was what she was. And I think, particularly for people who are asexual, in fact, the opposite spectrum maybe to you guys, it's painful for people because the perception is they should feel like they want the sexy sex all the time, and then actually they don't. And this is completely normal. And actually I can go on to have fulfilling emotional relationships with people and know where your tribe is. And I think for you guys, identifying that was your lifestyle and your joy, I've observed for you guys over the past couple of years, you found your tribe, you found a group of people who have
100%.
stepped in tough times of your life from this community who've helped support you.
Which is why it's so hurtful, I think, when people then say, oh, so you're swingers, so you just like wife swap. You're like, oh, God. And you do still get that, don't you?
I mean, I wouldn't want to wife swap with you. I'm not being funny. Mr. H is a fantastic cook, but I don't know what you're bringing to the table, to be totally honest. Tea? Maybe tea?
What?
What?
Maybe.
No.
Make a good cup of tea.
Uh,
Just saying, the cooking. Oh, no, you do a better roast. So
Hang on. I'm slightly confused by what appears to be a massive insult hurled at me, but I think it's actually held towards my wife.
I think it's me. I think it's me.
Yeah.
So I'm saying I wouldn't have Mrs. H as my wife, but I would probably let you cook for me
Brilliant.
every day.
It's a complicated dynamic.
You've taken what would have been a simple situation and made it very, very strange, Dr. Grant.
I know. I'm really happy. That's why I've been friends for so long. Make it weird.
Yeah, very strange. Going back to Netflix, you
Anyways.
mentioned sex education.
Yeah.
I also think Big Mouth does a very good job as well of
Yes,
bringing some of
it
these things to
does.
life. I think they stumbled a little bit over bisexuality, and I think they made a couple of faux pas in there. But on the whole, as a nice.
Oh,
God,
dear.
can
On
we
the
just
whole.
take a moment there to just wheel back some Austin Powers moments there, because I can't move on until we've
Oh, wow.
just
Austin
got rid of it.
Right.
It feels good on the
Oh,
whole.
all right, fine. But broadly, then, I think they've done a very good job of bringing some of these topics to life in a fun way, and the same as sex education. And the more of this stuff there is out there, the better it is for people, as long as it has a level of factual accuracy and helps people think through some of those things. And if you can laugh at it as well.
I hope it's given people a bit of an opportunity to maybe have conversations with their loved ones that they didn't feel able to as well. If it's out there in the general kind of media, and the media are almost encouraging these kind of concepts.
Big Dick Nick.
I really hope people can now feel a bit of courage and think, okay, well, that thing we saw on sex education, well, that kind of applies to me, and maybe we can have a conversation around it. I think it's
What, you're a
brilliant.
head teacher that's refusing to sleep with his wife?
Absolutely. Could you not tell?
I think, interestingly, for me, what is being portrayed now in the media, in shows like Big Mouth, Sex Education, that sort of thing, is much more positive and much more nuanced than before, and it's
Agreed.
more accurate. If you look at, I'm just thinking about consensual non-monogamy, what examples we had before, the only two examples I can think of is like a semi-erotic French art house like The Dreamers and Eyes Wide Shut, which is basically
good grief.
Copacabana with tits. That's all that is, that film. It's weird. Some sort of, and that's cult-like. It is cultish. And then the weird old pruny men are banging the nice women, and that's all that's happening. And that's the pervasive image that you get. That's all I remember
Not
from
a
that
great
film.
media portrayal, is
It's
it?
not. And that's the perception of it. And then you also have this litany of pornography that kids are getting their sex education from nowadays. And, Mr. Grant or his friends or whatever growing up would have a perception of swinging, but they would think nothing in all piling in and laughing at an internet video where people are swapping wives and looking at the titillation of it and making it a big joke and all of that sort of thing. So there's this weird dichotomy between young people and people in general having access to more sex and more porn and more genitals than they could ever want from the comfort of their phone, but they feel uncomfortable talking about it or have a perception that it's somehow wrong to actually go and engage about it in a healthy, respectful way, talking to one another about it. I find that very odd. I don't know.
Great points from Dr. Grant there.
Yeah, I think the whole sex education system probably needs a bit of a rethink, although we are light years ahead of some of our fellow countries out there. So
I agree.
I think we do an okay job, and certainly when the kids were growing up, they had some pretty good conversations with their teachers, and we had some fairly open conversations with them. And there was enough stuff in there that made me feel like they had like at least a decent chat about things. But it could always be more, it could always be better, I think. And there's so many things that we could change that would help people later on in life, that would just save so much confusion that actually it makes sense to do it. So next week I'll be running for Prime Minister, setting up the Bedhoppers Party. To
be honest, you're probably not doing anything less than majority of Prime Ministers have done in their spare time, to be totally honest with you. You all know what happens in the Bullingdon Club, all right? So, just with farmyard animals instead, apparently. So
all I need to be able to do
all the freaky sex in the parliamentary
I think that's
benches.
the hypocrisy of it, isn't it? Is that institutionally there is probably all manner of sexual deviancy or kinks or whatever going on behind closed doors, often many of which, well, we've seen with Jeffrey Epstein, institutionalised prostitution and paedophilia, where people are being procured and they're having these weird sex parties. And somehow you guys as adults consensually having a date with another couple and doing whatever it is that you guys fancy, where everyone's adult, everyone's happy, but that's weird. Okay.
We're the ones who are the dirty swingers who should be judged.
I think the other thing that we all need to bear in mind, though, is sex sells. And, the amount of times Mrs. H and I have had the conversation about gossip and about rumours and all this sort of stuff. Actually, sex is interesting to talk about. And if you don't get to talk about it very often between you and your partner, your spouse or whomever, or your friends, then actually if someone comes along and says, hey, did you know that such and such is doing this with them and the whatever,
is infinitely more interesting than
No, we never. They said they did what? They're going to do that, and they're going to beat them up because they're prettier than them instead of going to chin them, all that sort of stuff, right? But it's fascinating, I find, and I think that sort of stuff powers rumours because it's interesting to talk about. So as much as we may want to destigmatise some of this stuff, actually it's fascinating to talk about, and you've got to remember that it's an interesting thing. And actually, if we were to say, oh, we had this great orgy on the weekend, it's actually pretty interesting, or someone said that to me, I'd be like, what was that? What happened that? Yeah. So I think there is that to it. And I think you can't ever forget that, when you look at the press and the media, that talking about the lifestyle and swinging, that's always going to sell because it's naughty and it's sexy and it's something that you don't do yourself normally, and so
it's because they're secretly just jealous and they want to do it themselves.
Well, I think one of the things I've always thought is that if people are talking about how much sex somebody else is having, it's probably because they're not having enough themselves, or enough that they want. And that's often that's always the trope of sexually confident woman, for example, going out and getting hers, as is her right, and people going, oh, look at her, she's a right slapper, but people do it because they hate the idea of someone having sexual agency and going out and actually fulfilling themselves, quite literally maybe. But
sexual agency sounds like it'd be an amazing film.
Oh my god, do you imagine? Just
be like Kingsman but for sex,
and people in trench coats just pow, dildos, sexual agency. I'd love that. But a lot of the stuff that you guys do as part of your lifestyle, actually people could be doing, not literally the swinging bit maybe, but a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about, particularly with consent, that sort of structure that you have in place probably should be happening in your standard garden variety sort of Alan Titchmarsh sort of very Middle England sort of no sex please, we're British. That sort of conversation should be happening in every area of sexuality. But because you guys
but not gardening.
Well, I mean, if you want to,
because I'm confused by
fine. But what I'm saying is that conversation should be happening at every level of sex.
It should.
You guys are getting it right because you are so open and so emotionally intelligent with how you communicate with one another and with other couples. You have clear boundaries and you have those conversations early doors.
I wonder how many people decide to just go and sleep with their colleague at work randomly and have an affair, and then before we do that say, can I just look at the last time you were STI tested please, and can we just have a conversation about this?
And people just aren't doing it as well, like they're not being safe.
No,
so it's all very well
chances
saying
are we're being
swingers,
way more safe, and exactly that.
Everyone's saying dirty swingers, but we all know, people go out on a weekend, they have too many Jaeger bombs, and then they make some decisions that they later find questionable.
Exactly. Are we talking from experience there, Dr. Grant?
No, thank you very much. The rumours about me are not to be believed. But people do that, you look at university culture, and you know,
Right.
and then you
Exactly. I don't think there's many conversations going on about when was the last time you got tested.
or even, are you going to wear a condom? Sorry, but that's the fundamental, and people aren't asking it 9 times out of 10.
No, we're just getting the rocks off because they just do that. The fact that we're just giving our particular way of life a title and a kind of a concept, if you will, and that's where people then start going, oh God, yeah, you're swingers, like you must be into some pervy shit. Well, we're actually very sensible.
No, I mean, you might be in some pervy shit, but being a swinger's no precursor to it, to be totally honest. And that's exactly why I was like, yeah, fine. I feel like I wasn't being judgmental when you told me. I think I was just you are more sexually open-minded, and so...
No, I felt really judged.
Of course you did. But for that reason, you would be more open to having that conversation with one another. I think that was the thing. So yeah, it was just this makes sense for you. I understand where this is coming from.
So one other slight thought I had, not really so much related to the monogamy opinion of what we do, but it was more a question for Mr. H.
Ooh.
I was thinking if we decided to stop all this one day, and one of us decided, that's it, I don't want to be ethically non-monogamous anymore, and I want to just go back to our straightforward relationship of just you and I.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that would make you feel?
So I think at the moment I'm really enjoying the lifestyle that we've got, and it's really fun and exciting. But I think if we've always said that if one of us wants to pull the plug at any time, we absolutely would, and I stand by that. So I think I'd want the freedom to be able to say that, and I think you'd want that, and we both would respect each other enough to do that if that was the case. However, I think that at the moment, the friends that we've got, the experiences that we've had and are having, actually make it really worthwhile and really add something. I think particularly in, now that we're in the middle of crisis fucking central, actually it's been an incredible escapism for us to go on adventures and do different things. So actually the bit that really makes me think that
you'd miss it.
So the only thing I would say is that we both have to go around with the confidence that we can pull the plug at any time, really, and that's the only bit that sticks with me. I think if you wanted to, I absolutely would, but I would definitely miss it. I would definitely miss the friends that we've had. Not that they'd all be dead to us the second we pulled the plug.
Can't be friends now. You don't have sex with each other.
Yeah, you're all dead to me. Bugger off. But and I would miss doing the show, and I would miss the fact that this brings us together for a couple of hours a fortnight to chat away and keep things nice and succinct. So just 2 hours.
Here's a hypothetical one then.
Yeah.
If we for whatever reason weren't together.
Yeah.
And you got into a different relationship, would you attempt to reopen the doors of non-monogamy in a future relationship, or would you start off with a typical boy meets girl? Off you go?
I think I'd want to give a relationship a little bit of time to build the trust, because for me the trust is the really important bit. But I'd be open to having a more open relationship. But I think I'd want to be a bit selfish for a bit to make sure that if it is just the two of us, Mrs. Thundercat and I, that we can
bloody
make it work.
I knew she'd come back.
I know.
Panthera coming back and...
She's the bane of my life. She's been around since the beginning. Yeah.
Did you say Panthro as well?
Panthera,
yeah, she did.
Not Chitara.
Oh yeah, Chitara. She had banging boobies as well, didn't she?
I don't think Panthro was the dude that had the spikes on his braces.
No, I just do dinosaurs.
He's the one that went, cats. What the fuck's a summer flange, snarf, or whatever it was.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a thing.
I like the fact that, in your future relationship, you could be getting together with Panthro or Chitara.
Yeah.
Hey, he's more open-minded these days, guys.
My mind
or maybe both, if you're really lucky. But nobody wants to.
But meanwhile, by the by, is like rubbing their hands like, hey, it's not, I've heard.
It's not his hands that he's rubbing.
No, it's not.
But he'd never be able to take you out for pizza.
Oh, that's a low blow.
Oh, wow.
That hurts. That cuts deep.
He'll appreciate me saying it.
No, I'm sure he would do. I'm sure.
If only he listened to it.
I'm sure that Angela will go back and tell him about it nonetheless.
He mentioned Roadhead.
Thank you, dear. So would you give it up? What would your take be?
I would miss it as it stands at the moment. The amount of enjoyment we get from it and the amount of commitment we give to our relationship anyway. I don't think we'd suffer if we gave it up, because I think we're very strong.
We'd find other adventures, I suspect.
But I was going to say, I think we'd probably have to find an adventure of sorts, because I think we've both loved what that's brought to us, if that makes sense. And the sense of adventure is what really sort of brought us into this, wanting something that we can go off together and it would enhance what we have. It's been amazing. So I think I would miss it, but absolutely I could walk away from it if it was what you wanted.
What about drinking? Could you walk away from that?
Fuck off, no. Although I'm being very good this week and not drinking.
I have observed this.
I have a question for Dr. Grant then.
Oh, okay.
What would you say then if Mr. Grant turned around and said, well, Dr. Grant, how do you fancy giving this non-monogamy a whirl then?
It's interesting. I'd like to know his rationale behind it, because for me, it just in a non-judgmental, just where I am in my life, I know that consensual monogamy is just not for me. As a person, I feel emotions and relationships exceptionally deeply, and when I have my lobster, that's it, and I I'm there. So I
couldn't share him.
No, I can't share, because I commit myself wholly to one person. It's just the way I'm wired, and I think that's how I understand consensual non-monogamy. Is I'm just wired to be monogamous. It's just the way I am, whether it was nature or nurture. It's just how I am. So I think if you enter into a relationship with me, I put my cards on the table quite early with regards to that. So I would question his rationale for feeling that way, and whether there was something I wasn't giving him in the relationship, or he was unhappy for him to then feel that way.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I think we all feel pressure. We all feel a certain expectation to perform a certain way. I am distinctly remembering particularly of an incident that happened at my hen party where I started questioning some bits.
I remember that very well, Dr.
To Mrs.
Grant.
H, which we're not going to go into for fear of shaming someone else. But
that was hilarious.
I questioned in a Prosecco inebriated state that things that my friends would do sexually for other people I perhaps was not as comfortable doing, and is this a service I should be offering on my menu? Like I just roll it out. Hello, this is this evening's selection. I'd like to start on the breasts.
I like to think it's more like an airplane. You can have the tuna or the chicken.
There ain't no tuna going on.
There's no vegetarian option, I'm afraid.
Mine.
Sorry.
Thanks very much.
But that's interesting though what you said, because one of the things, when we entered into this, it didn't occur to me at any point, and maybe it should have done, that neither one of us was giving the other what we needed. It didn't occur to me once that you're not sated, or I'm not giving you what you need, and in the same way I didn't ever think but you don't give me enough. I really don't.
I remain so quiet on this bit.
But
you have remained very quiet, haven't you?
That's maybe why you guys were doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Because you guys,
that reassures me.
Enhancing. You weren't missing anything. Whereas for me as a monogamous person and somebody, I identify as monogamous, but
that would be your underlying fear.
That would be my fear, is that I'm not enough, or that
why does he want to go?
He's out of love with me,
else?
or he's bored, or he's because. Interestingly, what Mr. H said a few minutes ago about the open relationship, how many times have we heard, oh, we're in an open relationship, inverted commas, as a means for somebody in the relationship to justify them stepping outside that relationship for something they perceive they're not getting.
They may well need that. So if you take the world of kink, for example, service tops are very popular because they do provide a service to which someone can't get elsewhere.
And I think it all depends on the consent and the boundary of that relationship. And I think that's what's important, is when you enter into that relationship, okay, what's your thing? What's your boundary? If you think, actually, this is something I think will enhance our relationship, then fantastic, that's for you. But for me, as a monogamous person, I'm sort of like, okay, well, if I've set my stall out quite early in terms of what I like and what I don't like, and they've done that with me, what's changed? What's shifted that dynamic? Whereas you guys grew towards this more organically.
I agree. Although
No, she just kept roofing.
although you have touched on something there, but we talked about recently, I think, with LV. Lord Voldemort, actually, and he asked the question, and we've discussed it before as a group. Are there things that you do in your non-monogamous relationship that you wouldn't do as a couple, or that you seek elsewhere, perhaps? So, for example, do you look elsewhere to get sexual experiences that maybe your partner won't do or doesn't want to do with you? And we had this great conversation, didn't we, about...
It was a very quick conversation because we're both on the same page, broadly.
We were. But I seem to recall us having a conversation before, and, you know, I think Vanilla Ice piped up with well, sure, if, you know, someone wants to do this for LV and I don't want to do it, crack on. Whereas I had a very different view, and I was actually quite keen to make it clear that if I didn't want to do something with you, I didn't expect you to go and get that from someone else.
I would actually be quite offended in the sense that, without being rude, for me, that would mean that other person is providing a level of intimacy that I don't have with my partner. Does that make sense?
I think it brought in a few unwanted feelings of jealousy for me, or had the capacity to bring in some fear that maybe, if I can't provide something or won't provide something, then, and he finds it somewhere else, what if he likes it so much that then unravels us a little bit?
I think I get where you're coming from on it. I can understand both points on this, because I think if someone is in the lifestyle, and say, for example, the woman doesn't like having anal, or doesn't like rimming her fellow, or they all seem to be butt related for some reason.
They really do.
But those
feels good on the whole.
Yeah. Back to the butt again after last week's episode, or last time's episode. But you know, and their partner is happy for them to get that from somewhere else. Then I get that's fine, but they have to be fine with that. I think for us, our parameters are really set around. I don't think there's anything that we'd want people to do that we wouldn't do ourselves broadly. So I can't think of any examples that are coming off the top of my head. There may be skilled things that people can do, for example, like deep throating. I know you...
Right, yeah.
Mrs. H, she has such a tiny throat, it's, you know...
Such a great gag reflex.
Exactly.
So you can't do that, but I don't think you're that bothered if someone can...
Not really. I'm not really that bothered if I can do it or not anymore.
Yeah.
Does retching do it for men? I don't know. Just saying. Well, I mean,
but I was actually quite intrigued to see what it would do for you, if I'm honest. And I managed to quell that level of insecurity and gentle levels of jealousy that I couldn't do it, and thought, all right, well, let's see what, you know, if it's something that's a real deal breaker for him.
But I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned, and this predates our sort of lifestyle conversations. I remember we hauled up in a little Italian restaurant one night. Poor waiter that served us.
I remember that night. We got absolutely fucking hammered.
We did, but we
had a great conversation.
Great conversation about everything that we wanted to do with each other that we were really interested in. And actually, swinging wasn't part of the conversation.
This was before swinging. You're right.
And this was all about, you know, hey, what we were interested in, what we like, and we've done this a number of times over the years where we've just been absolutely honest about what fantasies do we have, what do we want to try, and what do we want to give a go, and actually that framed us up really nicely to go and try those things, see what works, what doesn't. And that informed a lot of what we're after in the lifestyle in a way, because we've kind of gone, okay, this is what's acceptable, this is what we're good with, this is stuff that might be special and only between us, and the rest of it is open. So I think, you know, but it was that one night that we had in a little Italian where we went through it all and kind of...
I remember feeling really, really excited, not in a dodgy way, but excited
why would it be dodgy?
I was able to have a conversation with someone that I loved so much and wanted to spend my life with, and already knew that you were my soulmate. And I was just so like riding a high, I guess, that I was having this conversation with someone who was prepared to at least explore these things with me, even if they just turned out to be nothing. At least we could go away and do it.
And there is something about that night that I do remember, and that was that night I did have pizza, and it was a Italian fennel sausage pizza, which was amazing, and we also had sex. So I'm just putting that out there.
Oh, you had sex after pizza?
Yeah.
Oh, collect your medal, sir.
I know, right?
So you're just trying to debunk that myth that you are...
No. He just wanted to get that in there, that he did carbohydrates and still performs actually afterwards, instead of lying there in a sweaty coma like the majority of us do afterwards. That's when you have that, you know, when you're sort of over 30, when you're like, well, we can have sex first, but if we have carbs, we definitely can't have sex after, because I'm going to be too bloated and sleepy.
Don't know what you're talking about, Dr. Brown. Don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. H, did you have any other questions for our delightful guest?
Not really. I think we've managed to cover most of the things as we went along, and most of the questions I had, we pretty much, as I thought we would, we just picked them up anyway.
So what you're saying is that you,
No.
internally you were right and
Yes. Correct.
I am
Affirmative.
right. Confirmed.
I love being right.
Well,
it
number
rarely
one.
happens. I never get to say it live on air. I'm right.
no. Good. I'm very proud of you. Dr. Crown, is there anything that you'd like to ask us or anything you'd like to say?
Yeah.
while you're
Well,
on?
I don't know. I think it's. I did have something to ask you actually.
Oh, go on.
So, interestingly, you guys were talking about would you ever step away from the lifestyle, which is actually very early doors. Mrs. H and I had that conversation about, were you ready? Were you happy to go into this lifestyle? I just want to make sure you're okay. And I think the first question was, are you both getting tested and being safe? Of course you were, but I have to do the mum chat.
Making us show you our test results was a bit mumsy.
Yeah, with my white coat on.
A plus
too
for
far.
efforts. Yeah.
Well done, guys. Just practicing on bananas.
Puts on the rubber glove and puts some
yeah.
lube on it. Right.
Yeah.
Checks.
You know, I didn't know why you had to do that.
Yeah,
but all right.
making Miss Roach cough. So I wanted to make sure that was okay, and also that you both had an out, that you both were comfortable in that if you dipped a toe in and you were like, no, I don't like this, that actually you were confident enough to step away. My question to you guys, because you've touched on it before in the podcast, is there a shelf life to swinging? Because I made a joke earlier this evening
you
about
did.
one of you popping your hip out when you're in
The
your
oldest
80s,
swingers in
and whether
town.
this is ultimately a lifelong lifestyle, and whether you get many older swingers in the scene. But also in the podcast you've talked about in the swinging community there is a perception of people who've maybe had one too many goes in the merry-go-round, which I find deeply ironic, by the way, for a community of sex-positive people who like to sleep with each other, that there's a perception that you can do too much of a good thing. And so that whether all of this combines to, is there a shelf life? Is there a finite amount of time that you can enjoy this lifestyle? Do you think you could... Are there swingers in their 90s? Please write in and tell Mr. and Mrs. H, because I'd love to know.
Who are the oldest?
They will
swingers
have
out
to
there?
physically write in because they haven't figured out email yet.
They
Sorry,
have to
guys.
send
I'm really
a
sorry.
telegram. Yeah, maybe it's in the Guinness World Book of Sex Records. I don't know.
Oh, it
but-
must be. There must be.
Well, so
some
we went
facts
to
around it.
Well, there must be, but we went to a party where there were a group of people in their 70s, I think,
Yes,
that
we
was
did.
still that got together and went on holidays together.
Regularly went
Did they
away.
And-
swing?
yeah,
Yes, they did.
Good for them.
exactly.
And I felt relieved that actually you still want to have sex in your 70s for one. Brilliant.
I mean, yeah, because it's,
You know, why wouldn't
things
you?
have got to start shriveling, and biologically it's harder, isn't
I would
it?
hope that I can continue to enjoy an active sex life with Mr. H until I'm too old to, put my own teeth in. But
I mean, sometimes that helps if you take them out. I've heard. Just pop them in a jar.
I think, we obviously know some older swingers.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And, they have no intentions of giving it up. But equally, do people maybe think that it's unbecoming of the older generation to be doing that? I don't know.
Oh, fuck what everyone else thinks. I think, I think we've gladly decided that we're going to try and not pay attention to what everyone else
We're
says.
going to grow old disgracefully, aren't we?
Plus, the world is changing, so we've got to set examples to all those young'uns coming up through the process. I think the other thing is that actually don't forget that as you grow older, so do all your friends and whatever that you've made along the way. So we're all in this boat together.
We'll be playing some weird game of sex bingo together.
Sex shuffleboard. Sort of a weird cruise ship.
I bet cruises become a lot more interesting.
If you're swinging, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think there probably is a point at which, physical things don't work as well as they should do. I think that's just a reality of growing older. But actually the community and friends and whatever, I think that can go on for as long as you can keep moving realistically.
That's sweet.
But, it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear if there's any sort of... Well, in fact, while we were doing the TV show, we met a lady that was in her late
She was
60s.
amazing.
And she'd had a long... In fact, she'd been on Jeremy Kyle.
Yeah.
And...
Wow.
Live
Live to tell the tale.
And lived to
She
tell the
was
tale.
amazing.
I believe she offered Jeremy a blowjob.
She did.
Or someone has to.
I wouldn't have done.
Hey, I like Jazza.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
no.
No.
I
No.
do.
No, it's
No.
a hard no.
No,
No.
I actually like Jazza.
Yeah. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards. So she'd apparently gone through a number of years in a sort of pretty bad marriage and without any sex, and then got to a certain age. That I don't know how that relationship had ended, but she decided to, you know what, I'm going to be a swinger
Make
and a
up for
porn
lost
star,
time.
and
Good for her.
yeah, and cracked on. So at, I think 67 or so,
Yeah.
she was making
was
the best of life.
amazing.
Yeah, so she was lovely to talk to. She was clearly having a lot of fun. So
She was having a great time.
Yeah.
Like, fair play to her.
Clearly, yeah, wow. But then I like that. I like that when people hit their retirement and then just find their joy and just want to go and
I think quite a few people had found
her joy.
Her joy.
her joy.
Yeah, now I know what that is. Yeah, learning every day, guys.
Then they found her enjoy.
Oh dear. So do you think off the back of that then, so we've established age, is there a limit to, because you talked about this and I was really like, confused about this perception of there being a limit to, because you get you talk about sort of being verified by people in your community. And you, a long time ago, you touched on the fact that there are the perception of some couples in the lifestyle who have maybe, had too many partners. Is that a thing? Or?
It can be. So
Well, I think you opened this episode by talking about the fact that some people just are in it for sex, like lots of sex, as much as they can get.
I think there is definitely certain swathes of the swinging population that don't like to play with people that have played with lots of people, and I think when you start, it's probably one of those easy traps to fall into, to think, oh my god, they've played with so many people, and that can be quite intimidating in a way, you know, but it also can put you off, and that, oh my god, and they've had so many people get their hands.
And also like a hygiene thing. Like,
well, yeah, but the reality is that actually, it doesn't really matter. But getting your head into that space, you know, I think when we started, we naturally sort of shied away from people who were super experienced, because we thought we're just
terrified.
naturally going to fuck this up and make a complete twat of ourselves. But fortunately, we managed to find people that hadn't played too many times and make a twat of ourselves with them instead.
And I mean, that's much like your teenage years, isn't it? You just stick to a wheelhouse of people who don't know you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And then kind of expand from there.
Training bra couples, yeah,
training
really.
bra couple, yeah.
Yeah, so
Training penis. Yeah, that's what we call it.
I'm not actually massively put off by the number of partners that people have, or
hang on.
Hang on. Yeah,
on.
I know where you're going with this. So what I was going to say was, I think actually people have a lot of sex generally, whether they're in a non-monogamous relationship or not, because, you know, why should it really matter as long as you're safe and as long as, you know, you're upfront and honest with people. So I'm not really put off now by maybe people having, you know, lots and lots of verifications, and it doesn't actually always mean that they're active with them as well. It could just mean socially we've met them.
There is a maturity to it, because I think back to our on the plane conversation where we talked about that conversation, the numbers conversation.
Oh, yeah,
that's number one.
I love that chat. But then that happens in every relationship. Surely you have the chat.
But so you have the chat, but actually, I think, you know, in a more mature environment and with a more mature person, it's probably easier. It doesn't matter, does it?
So
realistically,
I shouldn't have kept saying that's number one.
Yeah.
Kill the buzz. Right
1008, 1009.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Hang on, I found this notebook here from 1985.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I have a tattoo on the small of my back. You might want to check how many
What Dave
lines
was
on there.
here.
Yeah. Dave, and they just put notches after every Dave.
Dave. Chaz and Dave was here. Deep 80s.
Rabbit. Anyway, so I remember having that conversation and not being mature enough to handle it, and absolutely panicking. And for me, it was a level of, I didn't think that I would be enough for you, Mrs. H, because of the amount of people that you'd slept with. So I was worried that I could never measure up to that many penises and that many people and have that level of skill.
I was just looking for the right one.
Well, and I know that now.
And then I found it, and then now I've got
Now
more.
you loan it out. Now you got some more.
But I think that's true in all relationships. I mean, I remember having that conversation with Mr. Grant and him being not surprised, but like almost like, oh, my number's like considerably more than you, sort of thing. And I was like, well, that's no measure of quality. I remember saying to him, but you went in relationships with these and these people, and this is one night stand that you can't remember, and this is this. But actually, I've been in long-term relationships for 4 years here, 3 years here. So statistically, I've probably had more sex than you, Sunshine. And so, you know, over to you, Chuckles. But, you know, but I don't understand that this idea that numbers is a measure of quality or a measure of intimacy. Which
Unless you survey them afterwards and you've got like some graphs to back it
on
up.
a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy the blowjob?
I'll get back in touch with them all and ask them how they felt.
Yeah, we're going to just
Wasn't there a documentary where that guy did that? He got back in touch with all his ex-girlfriends and
yeah.
asked them why
They were
they
like,
dumped him.
You were a swine, that's why.
And some of those conversations were really awkward.
It was basically a load of women telling him, "You're a bit of a cunt, really, aren't you?"
Yeah, you were just a massive, colossal twat. Oh.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he had
This
the
is
emotional
awkward.
immaturity of my 7-year-old nephew. And no, I don't know. I just think it's, I think a lot of the questions that you guys raise in your lifestyle are endemic to just sex as a whole. And you guys are just more open about talking about it. And I think that generally speaking in the UK, people don't talk about sex as openly as they should do, or when they do, it's something salacious or someone's trying to sell something, or, you know, you always question that, don't you? What they're, even sex experts, they're trying to...
Sexperts.
Sexperts.
Tracy Cox, I'm looking at you. That's not your real name. But like someone like that go on This Morning, but they're selling it because people are going to tune in and they're going to talk about it, and then Twitter's going to go off and they're going to get their clickbait and their likes and stuff like that.
Clickbait.
Twitter's going to go off.
It's going to go off because I'm down with the kids. In it, fam.
This is lit.
Yeah. Fire.
I think that's what kids say. Lit.
I think
is that a
so.
thing?
I
Is that
don't
what the
know.
Twitters say?
Yeah, something.
But they're not having a meaningful conversation about it. They're just selling it, and you're completely right. It does sell, doesn't it? So, and that's why people are interested. So
It does.
when the rumours came about Mrs. H and Mr. H, it wasn't. It was just. Oh, this is interesting. Let's talk about it because we don't understand it, and so let's make up some stuff.
And as soon as you actually understand what it is, it's no longer that interesting to talk about.
Well, when you like started fessing up to people and started going, yeah,
And
what, and what do you want to know? The overwhelming reaction was, oh, because you weren't denying it, so it's no
I
longer
spent
salacious.
4 hours on a train answering every question that you could think of. But that was fun. I don't mind that, and I'd rather present this in the right light. It's funny that you say sex sells, though, and this will be my final Jerry Springer-like thought of the today, probably.
My final thought.
Yeah, in the amount of people that probably downloaded this podcast in the hope of hearing some sex or some sexy
so
stories,
sorry.
and have come across a philosophical debate over the lifestyle and numbers and swinging and all sorts of things.
I'm a very boring person in my real life.
This is true. She is.
confirmed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. H, anything to add?
no, I think we've thrashed it out, opened the Pandora's box of all the stigmas that exist,
Which is
and tried
ironic,
to
'cause
debunk some of them.
That's what I call my vagina.
Stigma?
No, Pandora's
Oh.
box.
Stigma the dump.
It's like call Mr. Grant's arsehole, so...
Well, on that note, I think I might just thank everyone for hopping into our bed.
Hang on. You can
What?
say that now, but
can.
we haven't said thank you to our guest.
Thanks.
Oh, bloody rude. How dare
It's terrible, isn't it? It's just such a bad situation.
Set off the raptors when you're not looking, mate.
Cove!
It's been a pleasure, Dr. Grant.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank
It's been
you.
really fun.
Thank you for not hopping into our bed, Dr. Grant.
That's all right.
We appreciate you don't want to.
The running joke is always, Mr. H was like, have you changed your mind? No, still monogamous, but thank you for the offer.
I don't think I've
appreciate
ever asked you if you've changed your mind.
Really?
No, I
The-
seem to
I
remember
think
drunkenly
that-
driving you in a car a few times
Yes.
and you were doing
That-
your one of us.
Yes.
That night when Mrs. H said, give Dr. Grant like a 6 out of 10.
What? Just send up the flare, see what happens.
Yeah,
if she goes for it.
Well, I was a bit merry as well, so I was like, it's just
Just
really
wind her
funny.
up.
Just, and then she was there. I really love my husband. Don't say it to me.
I was just like, this is so weird. I'm trying to drive down a dual
Repeating
carriageway.
it like a mantra all the way down the road.
Weird, guys.
I mean, I only turned it up to Christy Berg, so I don't know what you're worried about.
Christopher, what lady
We
in
were
red.
just poking the bear. We
Never
know.
since a man even asked if you wanted to dance.
Well, she gave us a lift, so
Christopher.
she's a good egg.
Oh, Dr. Grant's taxi service.
She is. Well, thank you, Dr. Grant.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, we ended ages ago.
Oh,
This
you
is
didn't tell me
fine.
that.
No, we're still recording, but it was I was going to use that end bit as the
Oh,
comedic end
comedic
section,
end section.
which we're still recording on now anyway. So you know, we
that's
can.
nice. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's more bye everyone now, since we'll just fade this off into the darkest backgrounds. Thank you for staying with the Bed Hoppers podcast. If you'd like to email us, it's at bedhoppersuck@gmail.com. And if you'd like to find us on Fab Swingers, we are at Bed Hoppers, and on Twitter we are Bed Hoppers Sucks. Thank you very much.